All right, today we're going to talk about how I gained 50 pounds of muscle in 6 weeks, namely how to do a rebound. So rebound is the most magical period of time for a bodybuilder or someone wanting to put on serious amounts of muscle. Dorian Yates even said himself that he predicts about 80% of his muscle gains came immediately following a contest prep. So the 6 to 8 weeks right after a show or heavy diet, that's when he gained the most amount of muscle. And that's what I experienced as well. In the 4 years that I was competing as a pro bodybuilder, I went from being a 157 pound ultra runner at the start of, my goal of becoming a pro bodybuilder to 260 pounds, pretty lean at my peak as a pro bodybuilder. And that took only a few years' time. And the vast majority of the gains, probably 80% of the gains, came right after a bodybuilding contest prep or heavy dieting period. And now when I say I gained 50 pounds of muscle in 6 weeks, that's not literally 50 pounds of muscle. It was 50 pounds of weight. We'll get into that in a second. But the vast majority of that was frankly muscle. It's not these just water weight gains, gains that just, you go ahead and get through the period and what we're going to talk about today and it goes away. I'm talking about you create a completely different baseline of muscle, a completely different look in 6 to 8 weeks post dieting period. And this is kind of my claim to fame with coaching. I've coached hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients, whether that be bodybuilders, hybrid athletes, power builders over the last 7 or 8 years now. And many of my clients come to me because of my rebound strategies. My rebound strategies are somewhat unique, but they are absolutely proven to work. I've got many clients on my roster right now that are currently rebounding and completely changing their look, meaning that they're going from literally moving up weight classes, starting in something like men's physique, and within an 8-week period, blowing out of that men's physique look, or different things like that, like putting on a whole new baseline of muscle. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to do this appropriately, how I did it. So the picture's right here. I went pro at 182 pounds in men's physique. And this was after a long dieting period. We're going to get to why that matters in a second. But the picture here is 182 pounds, going pro in men's physique. 6 weeks later, literally 6 weeks later, I'll throw up the timestamp so you can see, I was 235 pounds and still very, very, very lean, but with a completely new level of muscle mass. And now we're going to get to it in a second, but before everybody just screams, blasting my socks off full of gear, the amount of gear I used during the rebound was actually less, and for sure less toxic than what I even used in the contest prep. So it's mainly, while it still is in play, it's still absolutely a factor, the PED's load is not really the huge driving factor here. So let's get into how to do this. So first off, the main thing you're going to need here to set yourself up right is that dieting period, is getting yourself extremely, extremely shredded, and particularly getting yourself incredibly, incredibly insulin sensitive. So this contest prep right here, by the way, I rebounded after each one of my contest preps and dieting periods. This was my best rebound by far, but all my rebounds were excellent. And the leaner I got, the more shredded I got, and the deeper I went within the dieting, the better the rebound was. So that's why when a new client comes to me and their goal, frankly, is to gain as much muscle as possible, unless they're already really, really, really shredded, which does happen at times, but it's typically rare. I typically recommend we go into a dieting phase to set us up for a rebound. That's where guys that have no goal of even stepping on a bodybuilding stage, a lot of times I recommend just go ahead and have the goal of getting up on stage, because just you getting up on stage, you're setting yourself up for a killer rebound. So one, you need to go ahead and focus on dieting yourself down. Now, maintain as much muscle on the way down as you can. You don't want to be stripping muscle tissue off. But this rebound that I'm talking about that I did here, I was in contest prep for 9 months. I competed in a show, I believe, in July, and then I went to North Americans in September. And that was already, 6 or so months, maybe 5-6 months into a contest prep. Already very, very lean and shredded going to North Americans. Didn't get the pro card there, so decided to stay in contest prep until December, until the next national show. And so it ended up being about 9 to 10 months of literally dieting. So by the time I get out of this show, my body was itching to grow. So, it was a very miserable diet, but getting myself that lean, I blew up right out of it. And that's why it's called also a rebound. So first thing you need to do, get yourself shredded, get yourself completely insulin sensitive. Hang out there for a bit. Like I said, the more you can get your body kind of itching to grow, the better. So first, let's get into training. So with training, when you're in a rebound, this is when I recommend, you absolutely, if you've watched my videos, you know that I talk about having a logbook and needing to focus on progression. More so than any other time, this is important. You need to be stepping in the gym and every single time destroying your numbers from the session before. And during a rebound, you're going to be able to. One, you're coming out of a dieting phase, so you're going to have more food. You're going to be incredibly insulin sensitive. And with that is going to come massive strength gains. So week after week, session after session, with each individual set, you should be looking back at that, each individual set, the week before, the session before, and trying to destroy those numbers. If you're going into the gym during the 6 to 8 weeks post-diet, and you are just blowing up in strength, with that is going to come massive muscle gains. So big thing with the training, focus on high intensity. One thing I've mentioned with all my videos is that kind of Yates style training. Maybe have a little bit more volume here. During my rebound periods, I typically had more volume than usual, but I kept the intensity very high. But I was blasting food, which we'll get to in a second. And that allows for more recovery and all of that. Now, with this, you're going to be progressing at an extremely fast rate. Your body's going to be itching to grow. With this, you're probably going to need to sleep more. During rebound periods, I slept a lot more like 9 hours a night. Plus, I would have an hour nap after a training session in the afternoon. Your body's going to be wanting to grow. So you have the sleep there. Two, your body's going to probably be feeling pretty beat up. You getting under heavier and heavier weights each week. This is where most people withdraw into deload. I try to avoid deloads with myself or with clients. At least 6 to 8 weeks into it. I try to get through the rebound period, get us to a phase then where we can level off. We'll talk about that in the end of the video, how to end the rebound. But I try to get to a point where you level off before going ahead and taking a deload. So now let's get to diet. This is the thing that's going to be so important here. So most people, when they come out of a diet or a post-show phase, is they just start eating a bunch of food, or they keep themselves really restricted. The point here is you do want a lot of food, but you want the right food. So one, set your protein a little bit higher than you typically would. If you're typically at a gram per pound of body weight, set yourself at 1.25, even 1.5. Your body's going to be itching to grow at a much faster rate than typical. So go ahead and set your protein up a little bit higher. Keep your fats low. I'm assuming with your dieting phase, your contest prep phase, your fats got pretty low. I recommend keeping them pretty dang low. During my rebound phases, even when blasting, 600 to 700 grams of carbs a day, I still had my fats, trying to be around or under 60 grams of fat. So, we're going to blast carbs here, but we'll want to keep fat really low. Your body's insulin sensitive, so it's going to use carbs at an extremely efficient rate. So this is where go ahead and eat a lot of carbs, put them around training, and then you can start tapering up from there. You don't need to come out of the gate right out of the contest prep or blasting, hundreds and hundreds of grams of carbs more than what you were doing. Start tapering this up, week by week, depending on where progression's at. This should be really based off of progression, what you need. You don't want to just, overload your system with more than what you need. But right now you can utilize carbs at a much more efficient rate. So we're going to blast carbs. We're going to keep fats low, and we're going to have a little bit higher than normal amount of protein. Now, this is where so many guys talk to me about PDs. So I'm not going to get into the specifics here. I have, that is something, one, I reserve for my clients. And two, y'all know my story, being now completely off TRT, all of that. I'm not going to get into that here, kind of public information. What I can say is that my PD's load for rebounds was a lot lower than what people thought. People thought, they would watch my rebounds and would think I'm blasting my socks off when, Usually rebound periods was fairly conservative on a PED load. What I will give you though, what is important more than the steroids, more than the anabolic load, what's going to be very important here is growth hormone. So, and you don't need a ton of it, but a little bit of growth hormone when you're incredibly insulin sensitive goes a long way. And what you're going to want to do is maintain that insulin sensitivity. So for some people, it's doing more cardio in the morning. Some people, it's using, correct supplementation. My clients have, there's a supplement list I give my clients, natural supplements, over-the-counter supplements I give my clients for when they're in a rebound, stuff like GDAs, other things like that to keep their insulin sensitivity in check. And the timing around those is very important. But point here is don't get so hung up on PEDs. Yes, it's going to be important. If you're a bodybuilder and you're trying to maximize muscle gain, that is a factor. But I can absolutely say that my anabolic loads was less in rebounds than later on in a true growth phase after a rebound setting or any of that. So you can get by with a lot less, but growth hormone is going to be your friend here. So keep that in mind. So then when you're finishing up the rebound, you're going to have 6 to 8 weeks. I always had to literally put a stop on my rebounds because I was so uncomfortable with the new weight gain. Thinking in 6 to 8 weeks, you're up, 50 or so pounds. I went from competing in my last show, competing as a 212 bodybuilder in, I want to say it was September. At the Texas Pro, and by December I was 260 pounds. I had to stop each one of my rebounds. My body would have kept going up. Now all of that's not all muscle, but a lot of it is. But the new weight period, whatever it is, it's very uncomfortable for your body, and it can be also very unhealthy. So this is where don't get too greedy here. Go ahead and squeeze out a lot of gains, and then pull yourself back to kind of a health phase where you solidify the muscle. And all of that. And that's where don't go ahead and just all of a sudden when you cut the rebound, drop off a ton of food. You need to kind of do this incrementally and solidify everything you've got, but just go ahead and pull back on the momentum. And this is where, you can take deloads. You can get the body really refreshed. That way, if you're going to then go into a true growth phase, which is typically what you would do, you'd rebound, go into a health phase, solidify that weight and that muscle. That's going to be your now new floor, your new baseline to then kick off your true growth phase. This is typically how I did it, what I do with a lot of my clients. But there's, many ways to kind of skin the cat with this. So just food for thought. I hear so many guys, are perma bulking or don't want to get truly shredded because they don't like how their shirts fit or whatever when they're shredded. And I'm telling you guys, if you want to be truly massive, and if you've gone through my Instagram or you've watched me over the years, seen my transformations, most of them came through rebounds, guys. I'm telling you that if you nail a rebound and you've got kind of one shot with it, each time you go ahead and you diet down for a long period of time, most people ruin their rebound. You've got kind of one shot with it, but if you maximize that rebound, you will transform your look completely. You will have a new baseline look, a new baseline set of muscle and density and muscle maturity. It is a beautiful period of time. It's like, it's a unicorn period of time. All these kind of things when you see like guys must just be blasting their socks off to be getting crazy results. Some people obviously do that. But one thing that was really popular back with 90s bodybuilders, and one thing that I've seen within myself and so many of my clients is rebound periods are incredible, guys. And like I said, I've got many guys on my roster right now that we are currently rebounding, and they're crushing it. So this works, dude. So let me know if you have any questions. I can go into rebound talks, so much. A lot of this is kind of more than anything else I do. This is kind of somewhat, the way I rebound is unique. So some of the stuff I keep tight-lipped, this for my clients, but everything I talked about today, I can go kind of deeper in and help you all out with that. But let me know if you have any questions. Have a great day, y'all. All glory to God. God bless you. Have a great day.